Imagine the vast Pacific in 1942. Japanese aircraft carriers and battleships swagger across the waves, convinced of their invincibility after the triumph of Pearl Harbor. The Imperial Navy, the pride of the rising sun, seemed unstoppable, but from the depths, a silent threat lurked. American submarines, armed with torpedoes and ruthless strategy. Welcome to the Japanese Navy was surprised when U.S. submarines sank its flagships, an audiobook that plunges you into the heart of the submarine warfare that shattered the myth of Japanese supremacy. Prepare for a journey of stealth, explosions, and the collapse of a naval empire. After Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Navy dominated the Pacific. Its aircraft carriers, like the Akagi, and battleships, like the Yamato, were symbols of power, sinking Allied ships with ease. Japan believed its flagships were untouchable, protected by their speed and escorts. But in 1942, American submarines, led by the Gato and Balao classes, began lurking in the shadows. Equipped with Mark 14 torpedoes and advanced radars, these silent hunters attacked warships and supply ships, suffocating Japan. This book explores how this secret weapon surprised a navy that didn't expect to be vulnerable from the depths. American submarines didn't just sink ships, they destroyed Japanese confidence. In 1944, the sinking of the Shinano aircraft carrier, the world's largest, shocked Tokyo. Japanese sailors, trained to fear air attacks, failed to anticipate torpedoes from below. Diaries of Japanese officers, filled with disbelief, describe the panic. Our giants fall without us seeing the enemy. This audiobook takes you back to those moments of shock, where American stealth shattered the Imperial Navy's illusion of invisibility. Submarine warfare was a triumph of American ingenuity. While Japan celebrated its victories, shipyards in Connecticut and Wisconsin produced submarines at a dizzying pace. 77 Gato-class submarines in 1943. These boats, with a range of 11,000 miles and improved torpedoes, could patrol for months, attacking convoys and flagships. In the Battle of Leyte, submarines like the USS Darter sank heavy cruisers, leaving the Japanese stunned. This book reveals the secrets of their design, the daring tactics, and the courage of the crews operating in the depths. The psychological impact of the submarines was devastating. Japanese sailors, relying on their anti-submarine destroyers, began to fear every shadow beneath the waves. In 1943, Allied submarines sank 1.3 million tons of Japanese shipping, cutting off vital supplies. Japanese reports, captured in archives, show officers despairing, "We cannot protect our seas." This audiobook captures that shift, a moment where fear replaced pride, marking the decline of the Imperial Navy. The American strategy was relentless: to suffocate Japan by attacking its trade and fleet. Submarines, operating in wolf packs, ambushed convoys and flagships, sinking 55% of the Japanese ships in the war. In 1944, the loss of aircraft carriers like the Taiho and cruisers like the Atago crippled Japanese operations. One Japanese captain writes, "Our ships are falling one by one, without us being able to counterattack." This book explores that campaign, an effort that turned the tide of the Pacific. The courage of the submarine crews was extraordinary. Living in claustrophobic spaces, they faced depth charges and enemy patrols. In the sinking of the Shinano, The USS Archerfish fired 6 torpedoes under enemy fire, achieving a historic victory. One submariner recounts, "We knew each mission could be our last." This audiobook honors their bravery, a testament to how ordinary men achieved extraordinary feats from the depths. The contrast with the Japanese Navy was stark. While Japan relied on aircraft carriers and battleships, the Americans relied on submarine warfare, a tactic that Tokyo underestimated. In 1944, Japan lost 2.7 million tons of shipping, compared to the Allies' 200,000. This gap, amplified by submarines, marked the collapse of Japanese naval power. This book explores that disparity, a moment where innovation triumphed over tradition. Why does this story matter today? Because American submarines didn't just sink ships, they shattered a myth, proving that technology and strategy could trump imperial pride. Japanese sailors, in their diaries, and Allied submariners, in their memoirs, remind us of the human cost of war. Subscribe, ring the bell, and join this epic journey across the Pacific, where the silent hunters changed history with torpedoes and courage. Let's begin with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The Pride of the Empire of the Rising Sun. In December 1941, the Imperial Japanese Navy was the Titan of the Pacific. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, which destroyed 188 aircraft and sank 4 American battleships, Japan was crowned master of the seas. Aircraft carriers like the Kaga and battleships like the Musashi, with their 18-inch guns, symbolized unstoppable power. Japanese admirals, led by Isoroku Yamamoto, believed their flagships were untouchable, protected by destroyers and a naval doctrine perfected over decades. This chapter takes you to the heyday of the Empire of the Rising Sun, where blind faith in their fleet blinded them to the silent threat lurking beneath the waves. Pearl Harbor was a resounding triumph. On December 7, 353 Japanese planes, launched from 6 aircraft carriers, killed 2,403 Americans and paralyzed the Pacific Fleet. In Tokyo, propaganda celebrated the invincibility of the Imperial Navy. The diaries of officers, such as Mitsuo Fuchida, describe the euphoria. "We have crushed the American giant." This victory, planned with surgical precision, reinforced the belief that Japanese flagships, from the Akagi to the Yamato, were impregnable. Japan dreamed of an empire that would dominate Asia, confident that no one could challenge its naval power. The Japanese aircraft carriers were the crown jewel. The Kaga, with 90 aircraft, and the Shokaku, with its speed of 34 knots, could project power thousands of miles. In 1942, they sank HMS Prince of Wales and Repulse in Malaya, proving their lethality. The Zero pilots, trained for years, outclassed any rival. One pilot writes, "Our carriers were floating castles. No one could touch us." This confidence, fueled by quick victories in the Pacific, led Japan to underestimate its enemies, especially the American submarines that would soon stalk them. Battleships like the Yamato and Musashi were colossi. With a displacement of 72,000 tons and guns firing 3,200-pound shells, they were the largest ships in the world. Japanese sailors, steeped in Bushido culture, viewed these vessels as symbols of honor. In 1942, the Yamato led operations at Midway, although it did not see direct combat. One officer recounts, "The Yamato was our pride. Its very presence was intimidating. This naval arrogance, though inspiring, blinded them to the vulnerabilities of their behemoths, especially against submarine attack." Japanese doctrine emphasized the decisive battle. Inspired by Tsushima in 1905, admirals believed that a major naval victory would ensure dominance. By 1942, they controlled the Philippines to Guadalcanal with 11 aircraft carriers and 12 battleships. Destroyers, equipped with depth charges, protected convoys, and Japan trusted their escorts to thwart any submarine threat. One admiral writes, "Our seas are safe." This chapter captures that confidence, a moment of glory that would soon be challenged by American silent hunters. The Japanese Navy didn't ignore submarines, but it underestimated them. Their anti-submarine tactics, based on depth charges and patrols, were effective against primitive submarines. In 1942, they sank 10 Allied submarines, losing 200,000 tons of shipping alone. One Japanese captain writes, "Submarines are a nuisance, not a threat." This complacency, born of numerical superiority, left them unprepared for the evolution of American submarine warfare, which would soon sink their flagships with lethal precision. Japanese sailors lived with pride. Trained at naval academies like Etajima, they saw their fleet as a reflection of the Japanese spirit. By 1942, the Navy had 500,000 men, with officers planning every operation in detail. Sailors' diaries describe parades on deck, with rising sun flags waving. One sailor recounts, "Serving on the Kaga was a divine honor." This fervor, though inspiring, blinded them to reality. The silent and deadly American submarines were ready to attack. Japanese production supported their confidence. In 1942, the Yokosuka shipyards built 4 aircraft carriers and 20 destroyers, maintaining a fleet of 200 ships. The industry, although stretched by the war, produced 1.5 million tons of ships per year. A Japanese engineer wrote, "Our ships are the emperor's strength." This capacity, although impressive, could not match American production, which would soon launch 77 Gato submarines, designed to hunt the Japanese giants. Japanese propaganda fueled the illusion of invincibility. In Tokyo, newspapers extolled victories in Java and Singapore, proclaiming that the Navy would dominate for centuries. Civilians, watching naval parades, believed in an eternal empire. One journalist writes, "Our fleet is a dragon that no one can stop." This chapter captures that arrogance, a contrast to the submarine threat that would soon shatter their dream. Japanese confidence was understandable. In 1942, they sank 1 million Allied tons, losing only 400,000. Their aircraft carriers spearheaded the expansion in the Pacific, from Wake to the Solomons. One admiral recounted, "The Pacific is ours." But this supremacy masked a weakness, a reliance on flagships vulnerable to torpedoes. This chapter explores that blindness, a prelude to the shock to come. Japanese admirals, like Yamamoto, planned a short war. They believed that after Pearl Harbor, the United States would negotiate. By 1942, they controlled 10 million square miles, with aircraft carriers projecting power. One officer writes, "Our ships are the emperor's sword." This strategy, though effective initially, ignored American tenacity, especially that of its submarines. Life aboard Japanese ships was rigorous. Sailors, trained for years, lived under strict discipline. On the Yamato, routines included daily drills and honor ceremonies. One sailor recounts, "Every day we swore to defend the rising sun day. This dedication, while admirable, did not prepare them for submarines, which would attack unseen." Japanese air superiority was key. Zeros, with a range of 1,600 miles, protected the aircraft carriers. At the Battle of Coral Reef, they sank the USS Lexington. One pilot writes, "Our Zeros were invincible, but submarines, operating beneath the waves, were immune to the Zeros, a threat Japan failed to anticipate." Japanese logistics were a challenge. The convoys, carrying oil and rice, were vulnerable. In 1942, Allied submarines sank 500,000 tons, but Japan considered it manageable. One captain writes, "We can replace our losses." This confidence blinded them to the submarine campaign that would cut off their supplies. The Japanese Navy celebrated its glory. In 1942, parades in Tokyo displayed models of the Yamato. Inspired civilians donated to the war effort. One citizen recounts, "Our fleet is our lifeblood." This chapter captures that euphoria, a moment of pride before the storm. Japanese destroyers, like the Kagero, were fast and deadly, firing depth charges that sank submarines. In 1942, they successfully protected convoys. One captain writes, "Our destroyers are guardians." But the technologically advanced Gado submarines would soon outclass them. Japanese morale was high. The sailors, singing hymns on deck, believed in victory. On Guadalcanal, the Navy initially dominated. One sailor writes, "We fought for the Emperor." This passion, though inspiring, did not save them from the torpedoes that were to come. The Japanese admirals underestimated the United States. They believed the loss of Pearl Harbor would paralyze the Allies. One admiral writes, "The Americans have no spirit." This arrogance left them vulnerable to submarines, which would attack mercilessly. Japanese naval production, though robust, could not compete with the United States. In 1943, Japan built 2 aircraft carriers, while the Allies launched 10. This gap, ignored by Tokyo, allowed submarines to proliferate. This chapter explores this disparity, a prelude to collapse. Chapter 2: The Shadow Beneath the Waves. In 1942, as the Japanese Navy celebrated its dominance of the Pacific, a silent threat grew in the depths. The American Gato and Balao-class submarines. Developed in secret in shipyards in Connecticut and Wisconsin, these silent hunters were designed to suffocate Japan by attacking its flagships and supply lines. With a range of 11,000 miles, improved Mark 14 torpedoes, and advanced radars, Allied submarines transformed naval warfare, surprising an Imperial Navy that didn't expect to be vulnerable from below. This chapter takes you to the shipyards, laboratories, and seas where this revolutionary weapon was born, a testament to the ingenuity that changed the Pacific. The Gado class, launched in 1941, represented a technological leap forward. Measuring 311 feet long and carrying 24 torpedoes, it could patrol for 2 months without replenishment. In 1943, the United States produced 77 Gatos, each equipped with sonar and SJ radar, capable of detecting ships at 20 miles. One engineer recounts, "We designed a wolf that hunted in the dark. These submarines, operating from Pearl Harbor to Australia, attacked Japanese convoys, sinking 1.3 million tons in 1943. This chapter captures that innovation, a moment when technology challenged Japanese supremacy. The Balao class, introduced in 1943, raised the bar. With stronger hulls, they could dive to 400 feet, evading depth charges. Their Mark 18 torpedoes, electric and wakeless, were undetectable. In the Battle of Leyte, the USS God sank a heavy cruiser with a single attack. One captain writes, "Our torpedoes were ghosts." This capability, combined with mass production 120 Balao torpedoes during the war, allowed the Allies to patrol every Japanese route. This chapter celebrates that advancement, a pillar of submarine strategy. The development of submarines was a secret effort. At the Electric Boat Company, 10,000 workers built a gato every 3 months. Engineers, working with MIT, improved the Mark 14 torpedoes, correcting detonation failures. By 1943, 80% of the torpedoes were functional, up from 20% in 1942. One technician recounts, "Every improvement was a life saved." This chapter honors that effort, a logistical miracle that armed submarines for total war. The American strategy was to suffocate Japan. Submarines, operating in wolf packs, attacked oil and rice convoys, essential to the Japanese economy. In 1943, they sank 600 ships, cutting off 40% of supplies. One American admiral writes, "Our mission was to strangle their empire." This tactic, ignored by Japan, weakened its fleet, forcing it to protect convoys rather than attack. This chapter explores that strategy, a change that surprised the Imperial Navy. Crew training was rigorous. In New London, Connecticut, submariners practiced in simulators, learning to operate under pressure. Each gato carried 70 men, living in claustrophobic spaces. By 1943, 5,000 submariners were ready, capable of launching torpedoes in minutes. One officer recounts, "We lived to hunt." This chapter honors their discipline, a factor that gave life to submarines. The Japanese underestimated submarines. Their destroyers, using depth charges, sank primitive submarines, but not the gatos. In 1942, Japan lost 200,000 tons compared to 1 million for the Allies. A Japanese captain writes, "Submarines are no threat." This complacency allowed the Allies to perfect their tactics, attacking from the depths with impunity. This chapter captures that blindness, a prelude to the Japanese shock. Mark 14 torpedoes were key. Initially flawed, engineers refined them, increasing their range to 4,500 yards. In 1943 tests, a gato sank a target at 3 miles. One technician writes, "Our torpedoes were accurate arrows." This improvement, combined with sonar, enabled night attacks that surprised the Japanese. This chapter celebrates that innovation, a leap that changed submarine warfare. Submarine logistics was a triumph. Allied ports, from Pearl Harbor to Fremantle, resupplied submarines within days. By 1943, 50 bases supported 200 submarines. A logistics officer recounts, "We kept the wolves in the water." This network, backed by American industry, ensured constant patrols, a factor that suffocated Japan. The Japanese, relying on their destroyers, failed to anticipate Allied developments. Their sonar, with a range of 2 miles, was obsolete compared to SJ radar. In 1943, Allied submarines evaded 70% of Japanese attacks. A Japanese captain writes, "We couldn't find them." This chapter explores that technological gap, a factor that left the Imperial Navy vulnerable. The submariners' morale was high. Despite the danger, they believed in their mission. In 1943, they sank 600 ships, earning medals such as the Navy Cross. One submariner recounts, "Every torpedo was a blow for freedom." This chapter honors their courage, a driving force behind the Allied victory. American production was overwhelming. In 1943, the shipyards launched 77 Gatos and 50 Balaos, while Japan built 20 destroyers. This disparity allowed for constant patrols. One engineer writes, "Our submarines were Japan's nightmare." This chapter celebrates that scale, a pillar of Allied supremacy. The submarines operated in extreme conditions. The crews, facing 50 degrees Celsius temperatures and depth charges, remained calm. During one attack, the USS Tangshi survived 24 charges, sinking a cruiser. A sailor writes, "We lived on the edge." This chapter honors her resilience, a testament to courage. The Wolfpack strategy was lethal. Groups of 3 submarines coordinated attacks by radio, sinking entire convoys. In 1943, they sank 50 ships in 1 week. One captain writes, "We hunted like wolves." This chapter captures that tactic, a change that surprised Japan. The Japanese tried to adapt, but their defenses failed. In 1943, patrols increased, but the Gatos, with their silent hulls, evaded detection. A Japanese admiral laments, "We can't protect our ships." This chapter explores that helplessness, a contrast to Allied innovation. Japanese morale began to waver. Sailors, facing mounting losses, dreaded every patrol. In 1943, they lost 1.3 million tons. One sailor writes, "Our seas are not safe." This chapter captures that change, a prelude to collapse. Allied submariners constantly innovated. In 1943, they added surface radars, increasing accuracy. One officer writes, "We could see in the dark." This improvement, combined with electric torpedoes, made the submarines unstoppable. This chapter celebrates that evolution, a key factor. Collaboration with the British strengthened the submarines. Sonar and torpedo data improved the Gatos. A British engineer writes, "We were working to win the Pacific." This chapter honors that alliance, an effort that maximized the submarine's impact. The economic impact on Japan was devastating. In 1943, submarines cut off 40% of Japan's oil supply. Factories, without fuel, collapsed. A Japanese official writes, "Our empire is drowning." This chapter captures that suffocation, a blow to the heart of Japan. Chapter 3: Silent Hunters. In 1943, American submarines, operating as silent hunters, began to bleed the Imperial Japanese Navy dry. With their Gato and Balao classes, armed with Mark 14 torpedoes and SJ radars, they attacked from the depths, sinking destroyers, cruisers, and convoys with a precision Japan could not anticipate. These ambushes, carried out in darkness or during storms, surprised a navy that believed its flagships were untouchable. This chapter takes you to the heart of these operations, where the stealth and courage of Allied submariners shattered Japanese confidence, marking a turning point in the Pacific. An iconic ambush occurred in October 1943, when the USS Silver Sida sank the destroyer Akikaze. Lurking at 1,000 yards, she launched 4 torpedoes, destroying the ship in minutes. The Japanese sailors, expecting air attacks, didn't detect the submarine until it was too late. A Japanese officer writes, "Our destroyer disappeared in an instant. This speed, combined with the Gato's stealth, left the Japanese stunned, unable to respond." This chapter captures that shock, a moment when submarines changed the rules of naval combat. In June 1943, the USS Harder attacked a convoy in the Sea of Japan, sinking 2 destroyers and a freighter with 6 torpedoes. Operating at 600 feet, she evaded 30 depth charges. Captain Sam Dealey, nicknamed Destroyer Dealey, recounts, "We hunted like wolves. They couldn't see us." This daring, backed by improved sonar and torpedoes, allowed submarines to attack protected convoys, cutting off 20% of Japanese supplies within a month. This chapter honors that bravery, a testament to the power of stealth. Japanese cruisers, vital for escorting aircraft carriers, were priority targets. In November 1943, the USS Trigger sank the cruiser Nachi with 4 torpedoes in the Makassar Strait. The Japanese sailors, confident in their destroyers, failed to anticipate the night attack. A Japanese survivor writes, "The sea exploded. We didn't know what hit us." This ambush, executed at 2 miles, demonstrated the lethality of the Palau submarines, capable of diving deep and attacking undetected. This chapter captures that surprise, a blow to the heart of the Japanese fleet. The wolf pack tactic was devastating. Groups of 3 submarines coordinated attacks by radio, surrounding convoys. In December 1943, a pack led by the USS Pompano sank 5 ships in one night, including a destroyer. The Japanese, with outdated sonar, couldn't locate them. A Japanese captain laments, "Our seas are full of ghosts." This strategy, perfected in 1943, sank 600 ships that year, 40% of Japanese losses. This chapter celebrates that innovation, a change that suffocated Japan. Japanese destroyers, such as the Yukikaze, were fast but ineffective against Gatos. In 1943, submarines evaded 70% of depth charges, thanks to reinforced hulls and evasive maneuvers. The USS Wahoo sank a destroyer in the Yellow Sea, emerging unharmed after 40 charges. A submariner recounts, "We danced with death." This resilience, combined with the SJ radar, enabled attacks in adverse conditions, surprising the Japanese. This chapter honors that tenacity, a pillar of submarine warfare. The psychological impact was immense. Japanese sailors, trained to fear aircraft, began to fear the sea itself. In 1943, submarines sank 1.3 million tons of submarines, cutting off oil and food supplies. One Japanese sailor writes, "Every wave hides an enemy." This uncertainty, amplified by night ambushes, eroded Japanese morale, a factor that weakened their fleet. This chapter captures that fear, a contrast to the initial confidence of the rising Sunday. Submarine crews lived on the edge. In 10-foot spaces, they faced heat, breakdowns, and the constant risk of sinking. In one attack, The USS Tangshi survived 50 charges, sinking a cruiser. One sailor writes, "Our home was a steel coffin." This courage, under extreme pressure, allowed the submarines to operate for months without rest. This chapter honors their sacrifice, a testament to humanity in war. The Japanese attempted to counterattack by increasing patrols and depth charges. In 1943, they sank 15 Allied submarines but lost 600 ships. Their sonar, with a 2-mile range, was obsolete compared to SJ radar. A Japanese admiral writes, "We cannot see the enemy." This technological gap, ignored by Tokyo, allowed submarines to hunt with impunity. This chapter explores this impotence, a prelude to Japanese collapse. Allied production was key. In 1943, the United States launched 77 Gatos and 50 Balaos, while Japan built 20 destroyers. This disparity ensured constant patrols. One engineer writes, "Our shipyards were Japan's nightmare." This chapter celebrates that scale, a factor that overwhelmed the Imperial Navy. The submariners' morale was unwavering. Despite losing 52 submarines in the war, they believed in their mission. In 1943, the USS Harder He earned the Navy Cross after sinking 5 ships. One officer recounts, "Every torpedo was a step toward victory." This chapter honors his spirit, a driving force of submarine warfare. Night ambushes were lethal. Submarines, using radar, attacked in the dark, sinking ships before the Japanese could react. In the Philippine Sea, the USS Bowfin sank a destroyer in minutes. A submariner writes, "The night was our ally." This chapter captures that advantage, a change that surprised Japan. The Japanese, confident in their destroyers, failed to anticipate Allied developments. Their tactics, based on 1,941, failed against the Balao. In 1943, they lost 50 destroyers to 15 Allied submarines. A Japanese captain writes, "Our seas are a graveyard." This chapter explores that defeat, a contrast to Allied innovation. Allied logistics were a triumph. Bases at Midway and Fremantle resupplied submarines within days, ensuring constant patrols. By 1943, 50 bases supported 200 submarines. A logistics officer recounts, "We kept the hunters in the water." This chapter honors that effort, a pillar of victory. The Mark 18 torpedoes, introduced in 1943, were undetectable. Without a wake, they allowed for surprise attacks. In one attack, the USS Oath sank a cruiser with 2 torpedoes. A technician writes, "Our torpedoes were invisible." This chapter celebrates that innovation, a factor that maximized the submarine's impact. Japanese morale was collapsing. Sailors, facing constant losses, dreaded every mission. In 1943, they lost 1.3 million tons. One sailor writes, "Our ships are falling without a fight." This chapter captures that collapse, a sign of Japanese decline. Submariners innovated under pressure. In 1943, they added oxygen systems, allowing for longer dives. One engineer writes, "We gave the submarines wings." This adaptation, combined with daring tactics, made the submarines unstoppable. This chapter honors that evolution. Collaboration with the British strengthened the submarines. Sonar and tactical data improved the Gatos. A British officer writes, "We were helping win the Pacific." This chapter celebrates that alliance, an effort that amplified the submarine's impact. The economic impact on Japan was devastating. In 1943, submarines cut off 40% of the oil supply, paralyzing factories. A Japanese official writes, "Without fuel, our empire dies." This chapter captures that suffocation, a blow to the heart of Japan. Chapter 4: The Fall of the Giants. In 1944, American submarines reached their zenith, sinking the Japanese Navy's most prized flagships and shattering its illusion of invincibility. Aircraft carriers like the Shinano, the largest in the world, and cruisers like the Atago fell to the torpedoes of the Gato and Balao, leaving Japan in a state of shock. These ambushes, executed with stealth and precision, marked the decline of Japanese naval power, proving that no ship, no matter how large, was safe. This chapter takes you to the heart of these historic sinkings, where the silent hunters changed the course of the Pacific with an impact that resonated from Tokyo to the front. The sinking of the Shinano in November 1944 was a devastating blow. At 72,000 tons and 265 meters long, this aircraft carrier, converted from a Yamato battleship, was the pride of Japan. The USS Archerfish, a Balao submarine, stalked her for hours, firing 6 torpedoes that sank her in 17 minutes. The 1,435 lost sailors shocked Tokyo. A Japanese admiral writes, "The Shinano was our future. Her loss is our shame." This chapter captures that shock, a moment where a single submarine destroyed a titan. In October 1944, the Battle of Leyte saw the fall of the heavy cruiser Atago, Admiral Kurita's flagship. The USS Darter, operating in a wolf pack, launched 4 torpedoes, sinking the Atago in minutes. The 900 sailors, including Kurita, barely survived. A Japanese officer recounts, "Our leader was floating in the sea. We couldn't believe it. This ambush, executed under fire from destroyers, demonstrated the lethality of submarines, capable of striking at the heart of Japanese command. This chapter honors that audacity, a blow that paralyzed the fleet." The aircraft carrier Taiho, a jewel of 1,944, fell to the USS Albacore in June during the Battle of the Philippine Sea. A single torpedo, fired at 2 miles, detonated the fuel tanks, sinking the Taiho with 1,650 sailors. The Japanese, expecting air attacks, failed to anticipate the submarine blow. A Japanese pilot writes, "Our carrier exploded without us seeing the enemy." This loss in the Marianas Turkey Shoot weakened Japanese air capability, a testament to submarine power. The Atago's sister cruiser Maya was sunk by the USS Dace in the same Battle of Leyte. 4 torpedoes, fired in the dark, destroyed the Maya in seconds, killing 470 sailors. The Japanese destroyers, with outdated sonar, failed to detect the Dace. A Japanese survivor writes, "The sea betrayed us. This ambush, coordinated with the Darter, sank 2 cruisers in one night, a blow that disorganized the Japanese fleet." This chapter captures that devastation, a moment of panic in the Pacific. Submarines didn't just attack flagships, they destroyed morale. In 1944, they sank 2.7 million tons of warships, including 10 aircraft carriers and 20 cruisers. Each loss was a shock to Japan, which could not replace these ships. One Japanese admiral laments, "Our giants are falling one by one." This campaign, carried out with wakeless Mark 18 torpedoes, left the Imperial Navy without a response. This chapter explores that collapse, a contrast to Japan's initial confidence. The Wolfpack tactic maximized damage. Off Leyte, the submarines, Darter, and Dace coordinated attacks, sinking 3 flagships in hours. The Japanese, with overstretched destroyers, were unable to protect their convoys. One Japanese captain writes, "Our escorts are useless." This strategy, perfected in 1944, sank 55% of Japanese ships, a factor that suffocated their economy. This chapter celebrates that innovation, a change that surprised Japan. The courage of the submariners was extraordinary. In the attack on the Shinano, the Archerfish faced 20 destroyers, firing under fire. Captain Joseph Enright recounts, "We knew it was all or nothing." This bravery, in claustrophobic spaces and under depth charges, enabled feats such as sinking the Taiho. This chapter honors their sacrifice, a testament to humanity under pressure. The Japanese tried to adapt, increasing patrols and depth charges. In 1944, they sank 20 Allied submarines, but lost 1,000 ships. Their sonar, with a 2-mile range, was no match for the SJ radar. A Japanese admiral writes, "The enemy is invisible." This technological gap, ignored by Tokyo, allowed the submarines to hunt mercilessly. This chapter explores that powerlessness, a prelude to collapse. Allied production was overwhelming. In 1944, the United States launched 100 submarines, while Japan built 10 destroyers. This disparity ensured constant patrols. One engineer writes, "Our shipyards were Japan's nightmare." This chapter celebrates that scale, a pillar of submarine victory. The submariners' morale was unwavering. Despite losing 52 submarines, they believed in their mission. In 1944, the USS Tang sank 10 ships before being destroyed. One officer recounts, "Every torpedo was for freedom." This chapter honors their spirit, a driving force of the war. Night ambushes were lethal. Submarines, using radar, attacked in the dark. In the China Sea, the USS Bowfin sank a cruiser with 3 torpedoes. One submariner writes, "The night was ours." This chapter captures that advantage, a shift that shocked Japan. The Japanese, confident in their destroyers, failed to anticipate the Balau. In 1944, they lost 50 flagships to 20 Allied submarines. A Japanese captain writes, "Our seas are a graveyard." This chapter explores that defeat, a contrast to Allied innovation. Allied logistics were a triumph. Bases on Guam and Saipan resupplied submarines within days. By 1944, 60 bases supported 250 submarines. A logistics officer recounts, "We kept the hunters in the water." This chapter honors that effort, a pillar of victory. The Mark 18 torpedoes were undetectable. In the attack on the Maya, the Dace used electric torpedoes, sinking the cruiser unseen. A technician writes, "Our torpedoes were ghosts." This chapter celebrates that innovation, a factor that maximized the impact. Japanese morale was collapsing. Sailors, facing constant losses, dreaded every mission. In 1944, they lost 2.7 million tons One sailor writes, "Our ships are falling without a fight." This chapter captures that collapse, a sign of decline. Submariners innovated under pressure. In 1944, they added oxygen systems, allowing for longer dives. One engineer writes, "We gave the submarines wings." This adaptation made the submarines unstoppable. This chapter honors that evolution. Collaboration with the British strengthened the submarines. Sonar and tactical data improved the Belau. A British officer writes, "We were helping to win the Pacific." This chapter celebrates that partnership, an effort that amplified their impact. The economic impact on Japan was devastating. In 1944, submarines cut off 60% of the country's oil supply, paralyzing the fleet. A Japanese officer writes, "Without fuel, we die." This chapter captures that suffocation, a blow to the heart of Japan. Chapter 5. The End of the Japanese Naval Myth. In 1944, the Imperial Japanese Navy, once the pride of the rising sun, crumbled under the torpedoes of American submarines. The silent hunters of the Gato and Belau classes, sinking aircraft carriers, cruisers, and convoys, shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility. From the Shinano to the Otago, these attacks crippled the Japanese economy and shattered the morale of its sailors, marking the end of its naval dominance. This chapter explores how submarine warfare changed the Pacific, leaving Japan shaken and on the brink of defeat, a testament to the power of stealth and innovation. The Battle of Leyte, October 1944, was the death blow. The submarines USS Darter and Dace sank the cruisers Otago and Maya, Admiral Kurita's flagships, in one night. This ambush, with 1,370 sailors lost, disorganized the Japanese fleet. A Japanese officer writes, "Our command fell at sea. The loss of these cruisers, essential for protecting aircraft carriers, left Japan vulnerable, a moment that marked the decline of its power." This chapter captures that shock, a turning point in the Pacific. The sinking of the Shinano in November 1944 was the culmination. The USS Archerfish, with 6 torpedoes, destroyed the world's largest aircraft carrier in 17 minutes, killing 1,435 sailors. Japan, which had seen the Shinano as its last hope, was in shock. One admiral laments, "Our supreme weapon was lost without a fight." This feat, accomplished by a single submarine, proved that no ship was safe. This chapter honors that audacity, a blow that resonated in Tokyo. The economic impact was devastating. In 1944, submarines sank 2.7 million tons, cutting off 60% of Japan's oil supply. Without fuel, aircraft carriers were grounded, and factories collapsed. A Japanese officer writes, "Our empire is drowning without oil." This suffocation, carried out by 250 Allied submarines, paralyzed the Japanese economy, a factor that accelerated its defeat. This chapter explores that crisis, a contrast to Japan's initial arrogance. Japanese morale collapsed. Sailors, facing constant ambushes, dreaded every mission. In 1944, they lost 1,000 ships, including 10 aircraft carriers. One sailor writes, "Our seas are a graveyard." This fear, amplified by the invisible Mark 18 torpedoes, shattered Bushido discipline, turning sailors into victims of an enemy they could not see. This chapter captures that collapse, a sign of the end of the naval myth. Allied submariners, on the other hand, sailed with confidence. Despite losing 52 submarines, they sank 55% of the Japanese ships. In the Philippine Sea, the USS Albacore sank the Taiho with a torpedo, earning the Navy Cross. One submariner recounts, "We knew we were their nightmare." This morale, boosted by successes like the Shinano, was a driving force behind victory. This chapter honors their spirit, a testament to courage beneath the waves. Allied production was overwhelming. In 1944, the United States launched 100 submarines, while Japan built 10 destroyers. This disparity ensured constant patrols, sinking 2.7 million tons. One engineer writes, "Our shipyards won the war. This scale, backed by American industry, allowed submarines to dominate the Pacific." This chapter celebrates that effort, a pillar of Allied supremacy. The Japanese tried to adapt, but their defenses failed. In 1944, they increased patrols, but their sonar, with a 2-mile range, could not detect the Balao. They lost 50 flagships to 20 Allied submarines. A Japanese admiral writes, "The enemy is a phantom." This helplessness, in the face of superior technology, marked Japan's decline. This chapter explores that frustration, a contrast to Allied innovation. Allied logistics were a triumph. Bases on Guam and Saipan replenished submarines within days, supporting 250 ships. A logistics officer recounts, "We kept the wolves hunting." This network, combined with 500,000 torpedoes produced, ensured constant attacks. This chapter honors that effort, a factor that suffocated Japan. Mark 18 torpedoes were lethal. Without a wake, they allowed for surprise attacks. On the Taiho, one torpedo caused a massive explosion. A technician writes, "Our torpedoes were invisible." This innovation, combined with the SJ radar, made the submarines unstoppable. This chapter celebrates that technology, a change that surprised Japan. The morale of Japanese sailors collapsed. By 1944, they faced daily losses with empty ports. One sailor writes, "Our ships are not returning." This despair, amplified by Allied propaganda, led to mass surrenders. This chapter captures that collapse, a sign of the end of the naval empire. Submariners innovated under pressure. In 1944, they added oxygen systems, allowing for 48-hour submersions. One engineer writes, "We gave the submarines life." This adaptation maximized the impact of the Gato and Balao. This chapter honors that evolution, a key factor in their victory. Collaboration with the British strengthened the submarines. Sonar and tactical data improved the Balao. A British officer writes, "We were helping to win the Pacific." This alliance, combined with Allied production, ensured submarine supremacy. This chapter celebrates that effort. The psychological impact was universal. Japanese civilians, without oil or food, faced starvation. One citizen writes, "Our seas betrayed us. This crisis, caused by the submarines, weakened Japan's will." This chapter captures that resonance, a blow to the soul of the empire. The Wolfpack tactic was devastating. In 1944, they sank 1,000 ships, including 20 cruisers. One captain writes, "We hunted in packs." This strategy, perfected at Leyte, disrupted the Japanese fleet. This chapter celebrates that innovation, a change that shocked Japan. The Japanese, relying on their destroyers, failed to anticipate the Balao. In 1944, they lost 50 flagships. A Japanese captain writes, "Our seas are a graveyard." This chapter explores that defeat, a contrast to Allied innovation. Allied morale soared. The submariners, celebrating victories like the Shinano, knew they were winning. One officer recounts, "Every sinking was a step toward Tokyo." This chapter honors that confidence, a driving force behind victory. The legacy of submarines endures. Their success inspired nuclear submarines and modern tactics. In the 1,950 seconds, the U.S. Navy adopted the Gato model. One admiral writes, "Submarines won the Pacific." This chapter celebrates that heritage, a testament to innovation. The Japanese sailors, though defeated, displayed courage. On the Shinano, they fought to the bitter end. One survivor writes, "We died for the Emperor." This chapter honors their sacrifice, a contrast to the Allied triumph. In the depths of the Pacific, between 1942 and 1945, American submarines, silent as shadows, extinguished the radiance of the rising Sunday. Japanese aircraft carriers and battleships, once symbols of an invincible empire, became steel tombs beneath the torpedoes of the Gato and Balao. From the Shinano, the 72,000-ton Titan, to the Atago Admiral Kurita's flagship, these silent hunters sank Japan's pride, leaving behind an ocean of wreckage and broken hearts. This audiobook navigates those turbulent waters, revealing the wonder, terror, and courage that defined a submarine war that changed the fate of the Pacific. The impact of the submarines was devastating. In the Battle of Leyte, the USS Darter and appropriate sank cruisers in a single night, shattering Japanese command. Shinano, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, fell to the USS Archerfish in 17 minutes, a blow that shocked Tokyo. In 1944, Allied submarines sank 2.7 million tons of oil, cutting off 60% of Japan's oil supply and crippling its economy. A Japanese admiral, his voice breaking in his diary, writes, "Our seas have become our tomb." This final chapter mourns that loss, but celebrates the audacity of the submariners who, from the depths, brought down an empire. The psychological cost was immense. The Japanese sailors, steeped in Bushido honor, lived proudly in the Yamato, the "from you," but the whizzing of an invisible torpedo transformed their courage into panic. In 1944, every sortie was a deadly roulette. The survivors' diaries describe sleepless nights, fearing the next explosion. One young sailor writes, "The sea is no longer our home, it is our grave." This fear, sown by submarines, broke the will of a navy that dreamed of eternity. This audiobook captures their voices, an echo of their humanity amidst the collapse. For American submariners, every mission was an act of faith. In claustrophobic spaces, surrounded by steel and darkness, they faced depth charges and the specter of death. The captain of the Archerfish, Joseph Enright, recalls the sinking of the Shinano. "We fired with our hearts in our hands, knowing we were their only hope." The crews, 70 souls per submarine, lived on the brink, but their courage sank 55% of the Japanese ships. Behind them, the shipyard workers, forging 100 submarines in 1944, and the engineers, perfecting Mark 18 torpedoes, built that victory. This chapter embraces their sacrifice, a beacon of hope in the storm of war. The legacy of submarines transcends the Pacific. Their success, from Leyte to the Philippine Sea, inspired the era of nuclear submarines and modern tactics. In the 1,950 seconds, the U.S. Navy, studying the Gatos, developed boats that still patrol the seas. A NATO admiral writes, "The submarines of 1,944 taught us to master the deep." But beyond technology, this story is a reminder that human ingenuity, forged in adversity, can bring down giants. The remains of the Shinano, resting at the bottom of the ocean, are a monument to that truth. This story does not belong only to the victors. The Japanese sailors, fighting to the end in the Taihur the Maya, they displayed a courage that deserves respect. Their diaries, filled with promises to the emperor and letters to families they never saw again, remind us of the human cost of the war. Allied submariners, many lost in 52 sunken U-boats, left wives, children, and dreams behind. Japanese civilians, facing starvation from lost convoys, and American workers, exhausted in shipyards, share this account of sacrifice. This audiobook weaves their stories together, a tapestry of courage, loss, and redemption that resonates with every wave of the Pacific. As the sun sets over the naval cemeteries, where the remains of the Imperial Navy lie covered in coral, we honor all who sailed in this war. The Japanese, whose pride sank to the depths, and the Allies, whose audacity lit the path to peace. The submarines, with their stealth and torpedoes, didn't just destroy ships. They extinguished a myth, proving that human will can overcome any fortress. Subscribe, ring the bell, and carry with you this tale of silent hunters, an echo of fire and steel that still whispers in the ocean. May their sacrifices inspire us to build a world where silence is for peace, not war.